Auckland is facing a rising crime wave. The city's been inundated with ram raids, gang shootings, youth crime. Take a look.
Communities need to feel safer. These business owners, they should not be living in fear every day.
We heard these loud bangs as if someone was slamming a door. It is quite scary.
There's no room in our city for this sort of gangster behaviour. We fully support a strong crackdown by the police on them.
When you live out here, you have to take what's given to us.
You want to move from here?
Why?
It's not safe for my family.
We either move or we get a gun. And I don't want to have to pick up a gun and shoot anybody.
Only a matter of time before we see someone seriously injured or killed.
So if you think you've seen more reports of armed violence, you would be right. Last year was a record year for gun crime in New Zealand. And for those dairy owners watching, dairy and convenience store theft was up at least 30% on 2020 figures. Burglaries were up nearly 20%. I'm joined now by the Police Commissioner, Andrew Coster. Commissioner Morena, good morning.
Good morning.
Can we start with the guns? We'll do guns and gangs, and we'll do crime generally this morning. The guns, particularly the ones used in these shootings in Auckland, what sort of guns are they?
We've got a variety of guns being used, from high-powered rifles through to less serious firearms, but in the end they're all dangerous. We are dealing with the consequences of decades of lax gun control. We now have the funding to set up good regulation, we have the legislation, but it will take some time to have an effect.
Where did the guns come from? Where did they get them?
They come from a variety of places, whether it's stolen in burglaries, diverted away from the lawful fleet by an unscrupulous licence holder. We've seen a range of things.
OK. How many guns do criminals have in New Zealand?
Well, we know in New Zealand as a whole there are 1.5 million firearms, or thereabout. Obviously, we've recovered a huge number of firearms in the last period of Operation Tauwhiro, but there are clearly more to find. Australia's experience when they tightened up their firearms control was that it took 20 years to start to see the real benefits. And so clearly that's too long, and police is working in a whole lot of other ways to target the groups that are perpetuating this violence.
So how many guns do criminals have? You don't know?
Oh, clearly we don't know.
Okay.
Clearly we don't know the answer to that.
So,
if we did, we wouldn't have the problem.
Are you taking guns? Because I've seen your press releases. There's a lot of congratulating going on about the confiscation, the seizure of weapons. Are you taking guns off gangs faster than they are able to procure them?
Look, I believe we are having an impact there, but clearly this is a really...
Commissioner, how can you know that if you don't know how many guns the gangs have?
Yeah, look, clearly there's a huge amount that we don't know. But what I can say is that we now have the tools that we need to tighten up, be it around who gets a firearms licence, around accountability, that if you buy a firearm today, you've still got it unless you've sold it to someone who's allowed it. All of those things need to come through, and they will take time. So in the meantime, we have to target those who see fit to use this violence.
So the problem I have with this is, as you say, you don't know what you don't know. But you keep saying that things are getting better, that the community is getting safer. You said that after the gun buyback scheme. Do police officers feel that the community is safer now than in 2019?
Oh, look, clearly we're in an incredibly challenging period at the moment. We've got, particularly in Auckland, a couple of groups who are at each other. In doing that, they're endangering the public. And so what we are doing is targeting those groups with every enforcement measure we can find to send a message about their behaviour. The long-term game here is tightening up firearms control, but with 1.5 million firearms in this country, we've got a huge amount of work to do before we can say that that situation is dramatically improved.
Do you feel safer now than you did 2 years ago?
Oh, look, I think everyone has to acknowledge this is a very difficult period that we are in and that we have been through over the last couple of years.
Okay,
so
when will the period end?
Feeling unsafe.
Commissioner, when will the period end? Because we've had you tell us that the gun buyback scheme, the $100 million that was spent, was going to make us safer and make people feel safer. You've put out press releases saying how many guns you're taking off the criminals and that we're all going to feel safer. When will we actually be safer?
Look, this is as I said at the start, this is a long-term game. It takes quite a while to get the right controls in place and for those to have an effect.
20
We're committed
years.
to doing that. We must do that for the
Sorry,
the safety of our
you're saying
country.
that this level of violence will continue for the next 20 years?
No, not at all. I'm saying that in terms of gun control, it's a long-term game. The violence in gangs comes and goes over time. We are in an elevated period at the moment, there's no doubt about that, and we are doing the right things to target the groups, to send the message and hold them accountable.
You say that you've got all the tools that you need. What about, and this was an idea put forward by Nicole McKee, allowing police officers to seize the assets of gang members if they are found with an illegal firearm? Would that not make your job a hell of a lot easier? Because if you're a gang member and you know that if you're found with an illegal firearm, you could lose your Harley, would that not help you guys?
We are providing advice to government on tools to target both unlawfully obtained assets and gangs generally. So there's always opportunity for improvement there, and we will provide that advice to government.
Have you asked for something like this from the government so far?
We are providing advice on a range of things, including in relation to assets, and there is legislation underway at the moment that will work into that area, and also in relation to how we target gangs generally.
So can you be more specific about what you've asked for?
No, not at this stage. That our responsibility is advice to government, but what I can say is there's always opportunity to improve the tools that we have, and we are providing that advice, and it will be a matter for Parliament as to what tools are provided.
OK, let's put that to the side for 1 second. Does this idea appeal to you, where if the police could go in, see a gang member with a gun and tell them they'll lose their Harley, would that help you?
Look, there's a real balancing act to be struck here, and those balances around between the rights and freedoms in a democratic country and our ability to target,
rights of a gang member to own a Harley
behaviour. Look, I'm not defending that. All I'm saying is those balancing acts are for Parliament. We will provide the advice that we can provide. Clearly, any tool that helps us to target gangs will be welcome. However, there's always trade-offs in that, and those aren't ours to make.
Have you asked for the 24/7 tactical response teams to be... I mean, and that's your decision really, isn't it? Are you considering bringing them back?
So the tactical response model, for which we've received $200 million of funding in the budget just gone, will see us deploying specialist groups right across our policing districts. It will see an increase in tactical teams who can provide the support needed. It will also see our frontline equipped in a much better way to deal with the issues they're facing. So I'm very confident about what we're doing there.
OK, let's talk about the gang numbers. I want to play your clip here. This is from Billy McFarlane, who is a gang rehab advocate. He works closely with those who are in gangs, around gangs, on the fringe of gangs. Here's what he told us about the number of gang members in New Zealand last week.
How many people, roughly, do you believe that there are involved in gangs?
I think the numbers are grossly underestimated. I believe we already have more gang members in the country than we've got police.
Well, the estimate is 7,000.
Yeah, but I think they're counting the main gangs, but there's like around 50 street gangs in Auckland alone.
Commissioner, do you know how many gang members there are in New Zealand?
Look, the numbers range here massively. If we went back in time in our NIA system, you could get a number that went 37,000 gang members. But actually, when you look into it, a lot of that data is inaccurate. You've got associates. We're working through it. The best indicator that we've got is the National Gang List. That is at about 8,000. But there are a lot of other people who may be suspected of gang membership that we haven't been able to prove it out. So I saw an academic paper from Jared Gilbert that said 22,000. Honestly, and what's a gang anyway? Because we've got teenagers who group up and call themselves a gang. Is that someone we should be worried about or not?
Well, when they're
ramming
cars into dairies, I'd think so, Commissioner. Just you mentioned 37,000. Has one of your staff told you that number, 37,000? Is that police intelligence?
That was the number. That was, if you go back, and this is a few years back, if you said, well, how many alerts are there in our NIA system about gang members. You had a number of 37,000. Actually, when we've gone through that, the information was pretty unreliable. We don't aim to capture that information to provide a statistic. We use it for operational purposes. We use it for intelligence and targeting. We're focused on the behaviour. You can get tied up in the numbers, but actually we need to worry about what's happening in our communities.
But aren't the numbers really important? Because they will determine your response to the problem. I'm looking at a report from February of last year when there was huge controversy around the number of gang members and the fact we didn't really know. Have you seriously not asked somebody for hard data since February last year?
If you think about what we would have to do to demonstrate this, you know, we've got a bunch of people who we would suspect may be gang involved. Are we going to go and visit them all and say, are you in a gang? You know, when was the last time you attended a club meeting? In the end, what police needs to be concerned about is the overall trends in behaviour. That's where we focus our effort, and our people are incredibly focused on targeting the unlawful behaviour of gangs. We are concerned about gangs as a problem more generally, but most of the solutions to the underlying social issues sit outside of police's domain.
Commissioner, do you accept that your change in policy on police pursuits has led to more ram raids, particularly across Auckland?
No, I don't. The people who are involved in these ram raids, many of them are under 15. We need to look seriously at why those kids are not productively engaged. There are a lot of kids not going to school post-COVID. The policy we are looking at, you know, there's a real balance again to be struck here. The 10 years before the policy change, we killed 60 people through police pursuits. No one has died in a police pursuit since we changed the policy. But obviously there's a balance. And the question is, well, for what offence would we be prepared to put the public at risk by engaging in a pursuit?
So you're looking at changing your pursuits policy?
We are looking at fine-tuning it, but it will be in the nature of a fine-tuning if there's any change. The fundamental position lines up with what other jurisdictions are doing and looks like international best practice.
Is this something that you have decided to do off your own bat, or is the government telling you to do this?
This is my decision. It sits with me, and it's not the government's place to dictate.
Do you feel you made a mistake changing that policy?
No, I don't. I have no regrets about saving the lives that we've saved. I do find, you know, it's a massive responsibility to work out where the balance sits, and we have to get it right. The reality is, if we change the policy to pursue in certain circumstances, then we do increase the risk, and inevitably there'll be consequences. And it's in any given case, it can be hard to justify why a certain thing happened when you have to look at that big.
And there will be dairy owners and shop owners in Auckland who are literally sleeping in front of a CCTV camera saying, I'm sorry, the consequences should be borne by the person who decides to take illegal action.
Yeah, look, of course, but the problem is we don't get to decide who dies when a pursuit crashes. We need to remember we are holding these young people to account too. We've laid literally hundreds of charges for young people involved in these ram raids. That in itself is not going to solve the problem. It's an important thing to do, but clearly you're not going to send a bunch of under 15-year-olds to prison. So where are the other solutions coming out of community, coming out of understanding why these kids aren't well engaged? Because we can arrest them as much as you like. In the end, if they back into the same environment that meant they went and did that in the first place, then that's where our problem sits.
All right. Commissioner, as always, I really appreciate you coming on the program. Thank you very much for your time this morning.